This is where the museum starts. We have battle flags of the various units. 149th Armor, their history is they were captured on Bataan and participated in the Death March. 143rd Evac Hospital from Los Alamitos. And this is our birth certificate. This is the Adjutant General's, the first Adjutant General of California, his commission and appointment order, signed by the Governor and Secretary of State, Peter Burnett. And you'll notice the capital is in San Jose.
Is that the same Peter Burnett that we talk about, the Burnett Awards? And
No,
okay.
this is the one that said massacre all the Indians. But I think there's a relationship because I think Burnett Lumber, it was his business.
Okay.
This is what California looked like in the circa 1856. There is no Riverside County. There is no Imperial County. There's no Orange County. And some of these counties don't, Siskiyou County doesn't, no, Klamath County doesn't exist anymore. And there's a lot, you know, San Luis Obispo County is twice the size that it is now. Kern County is really big because there was no Tulare County at the time, or Kings County.
But the state is the same, right?
The state is the same. And we have, this is the commission of Edward O'Connor and his appointment as a colonel of the 3rd California Infantry during the Civil War. He founded Fort Douglas, which is now the University of Utah. And the National Guard still has a small enclave of the old Civil War barracks there at the University of Utah. In fact, all their history of the Civil War is about the California Volunteers. Here we have a saber belonging to First Sergeant George Snyder of Company E, 1st California Cavalry, 1st California Volunteer Cavalry Regiment, Civil War unit raised for federal service. That didn't go back east. They replaced all the federal garrisons west of the Rockies because they were worried about the Confederates seizing the port in Los Angeles, which they tried. There was an active Indian war going on, and someone had to keep an eye on the Mormons in Utah. That's why Fort Douglas was established.
So does this serve as office space too?
This is, yes.
Yes.
We have 800 employees here.
Okay.
This is the commission of Homer Carpentier, who was the founder of Oakland. He was a major general in the militia, along with John Sutter, and I think Bidwell was another, yep. This is what the 1st California Guard, which was the first militia unit raised by the military government of California. This is what their uniforms look like with the shakos and the bearskin.
So that tall hat is the shake-up?
These are the shakos.
Okay. And this is...
I doubt if they really look that good.
So is this a drawing or what?
This is a lithograph from the 1850s.
Okay.
First Sergeant Snyder, whose saber we just saw, this is his canteen and cartridge box. And this is a unique...
So Dan, how did you know where...
We had paperwork.
You have paperwork on it.
We had provenance.
So was this like given by like his family or something?
Exactly.
Interesting.
And they had a copy of his service record.
Of his service record, okay.
So this is the ceremonial battle axe of the Sarsfield Grenadier Guards. This unit is still active. There was 4 what they called pioneers, and these were the guys who would go in an infantry battle and cut away the any fortifications or wire or stuff like that. And they had a regular axe for it, but for ceremonial purposes, they had this one. And this is, they were allowed to have beards. They wore leather aprons because they also handled the forges.
Oh, okay.
So the beard was necessary to protect their face. This is the only surviving one of 4. It later became an artillery unit, which we'll talk about next, a little farther down. And now it's Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 168th Aviation Regiment, the medevac company here at Mather. This is a photograph of Francis Ebner, the founder of the Ebner Hotel in Old Sacramento. This painting was done about 30 years ago. This is the Pacific Stable, and this is the Eagle Room of the Firehouse Restaurant. This is where I used to live, in that building. That's the Clarendon House.
And
And the old museum was across the street.
So that used to be inhabitable.
That was the armory.
At one point,
Yeah.
in Old Sacramento, you could live in Old Sac.
I did it, you still can.
Okay.
I moved out about 15 years ago.
Right.
So this is a reprint of you see this on Zazzle. You can get this any size, but this shows just how colorful the uniform, the standard work uniform was the standard Army blue uniform. But these were the dress uniforms of all the militia, some of them who weren't part of the state structure. So you had an Argentinian unit, you had the Garibaldi Guard, you had a lot of German units that weren't part of the state, and including an African American unit. This is our Civil War case, and a little before, a little after. These are the muster books there was actually a unit called the National Guard. Before the National California Guard was the California Guard, it was the California Militia. And it was in San Francisco. This is their muster book. It had all their rules. And this is the one for the Auburn Grays, which is in 1866. This one dates from the 1850s.
So are there names and so forth in here?
Yes, all their names, when they enlisted. We have more of these carte de visite, some in color, which are hand colored, and these are showing the Frisbee Guard from Benicia.
So what are some of these things in here?
Okay, so what we have here is a statue to Colonel Connor, Brigadier General Connor, which the full-size one is at the University of Utah. So one unit did go back east. Massachusetts was short volunteers, so they enlisted Californians. And the first unit was the California 100, which was Company A of the 2nd Massachusetts Volunteer Cavalry. This is the reproduction. We do have the original one that will never see the light of day again because it's so fragile.
And the original used to be where?
It was in the Capitol, and now it's in the State Archives, locked up in a purpose-built storage case.
So when did it come down out of the Capitol? Because I remember.
1974.
Okay. And then what are these things in
Okay,
here?
so here we have a British-made field coffee pot.
Oh. I would've never thought
That
that's what
you
was.
used alcohol or whale oil to heat your coffee. An artillery sword, which is not for fighting, it was more to hack away brush. A 1861 Springfield musket, a Spencer carbine, and this sword was presented to Major DeWitt Thompson, who was the commander of the California Battalion of the 2nd Massachusetts Volunteer Cavalry. They had so many Californians, it was 51%, so we got the credit for the 2nd Massachusetts Cavalry, and so we got their colors and everything about once a year, and I'm about due right now for my counterpart in Massachusetts to demand the colors of the 2nd Mass Cavalry. And I said, every time I look at it, I see the Great Seal of California. Well, maybe the Great Seal of the Commonwealth is on the other side. Says, I don't know, because when they stitched it down to muslin in 1928, no one took a picture of the other side.
Okay.
And then we have a band sword, what they call the Hardy hat, which was the standard hat for the regular Army. And most of them ditched it except for the Iron Brigade, which were called the Black Hats.
Oh, okay.
And then we have a Civil War. This is what the California Volunteer Cavalry and the 2nd Massachusetts Cavalry would have worn. This is the shell jacket. One of these means volunteers. If it had 2, you're a regular Army. If you had none, you were militia.
Oh, okay.
Orange cap for Company A, the California 100. These are reproductions. This is a 1870 Shako for the 2nd California Artillery, which is what that unit became. And this was for light artillery, which was horse-drawn, as opposed to heavy artillery, which was fixed. We copied the Prussians in 1870 after they beat the
I was
French.
just about to ask you.
And so if you had a plume, you were either a senior officer or your job was to ride a horse.
Okay.
So cavalry, signal corps, and light artillery had the plume. And this is horsehair. And this is an 1870 uniform.
The embroidery's neat on that one.
So this is a really unusual picture. This is a cabinet card that shows a Nisei in Company E, 9th California Infantry Regiment in San Bernardino, circa 1890 to 1895. I've talked to people at the Pentagon. This may have been the first Asian in the U.S. military. And then we have the famous.
How would he have come into the military? He would have been.
He would have joined.
But he would have been a citizen, or he would have not been.
They were kind of.
Not
Not necessarily, yeah. He may have been a citizen. We could probably pull the muster roll for that unit. That unit was absorbed by another unit
Right.
in 1895, so a Japanese name would definitely
Stand
stick
out.
out. But that would be going down to the state archives for about a week.
Yeah, I was just interested.
We have a
if he
McClellan
was-
saddle that was. This is a 1870s McClellan saddle. Used by cavalry or mounted infantry officers or light artillery. And then this one has a lot of ties to Sacramento. This is that unit we talked about. This is the artillery. This is the muster roll for Company C, 1st California Artillery Regiment. The very first name is Albert Gallatin, who brought electricity to Sacramento.
Yeah.
Further down, we have the stepbrothers Weinstock and Lubin.
You did Weinstocks?
Weinstocks, and then John Bruner. Bruner's Home Furnishings.
Furnishings.
And if you look at where all these people worked, a lot of them worked courthouse, California State Bank, a lot at Central Pacific Railroad. Just a whole, this was a lot of people who were the upper society of Sacramento.
So you find a lot of names that are recognizable in Sacramento for generations, right?
Greg, I gave a copy of this to Greg to see if he can spot any other ones. So here we have a couple of interesting, again, another carte de visite showing the Emmett Guard, which was from the 1st Irish Regiment, Battalion, in San Francisco. So his shell jacket is green, not blue.
So they had Irish regiments
Yes,
too.
they had Irish and German and then everybody else.
So those were segregated units, or they were kind of inclusive?
Eventually, they were all rolled into the 1st.
Right.
But they were, because the Germans didn't want to play with the Irish, and the Irish didn't want to play with the Anglos.
Okay.
It wasn't that they were forced into those units, they just wanted to be, like, their armory was the Irish American Hall.
Right.
The
So
Fenian Hall.
initially, those units were
They were raised in the community, got state
and
recognition.
started like that, and then it
Yeah,
became
yeah.
interesting. That's really interesting.
So this is what they call the chapeau de bras, the brass hat of.
Is that a seaman hat?
No, that is a general's hat.
Ah.
And his sword. This gentleman, I can't remember his name right now, but was the founder of Santa Margarita and the San Luis Obispo Water Company.
Oh, nice.
So then we have a Civil War Colt picture and boondocks. Civil War spurs, and I'm going to have you guess what this brass plate thing is.
This brass plate thing?
This sheet brass right there.
I don't know, for the buttons?
Exactly. It was so you could polish the buttons without getting your uniform dirty. And that's a mirror. Yeah,
To do, okay.
yeah. Here we have, I forgot to go back here. I got this off of at a estate sale in San Francisco. When I saw I saw it online. Anything we can get that's pre-1906 San Francisco,
Why?
because everything got destroyed in the earthquake. All our armories were destroyed. 80% of our history went up in flames. So this is that unit, that 1st California Guard with the white. And you can see this is what they're wearing. Those jackets are red. And this is their rifle team in 1871.
Not exactly what I would think of as a rifle team, right, for the National Guard.
Here's their rifles with their bayonets fixed.
Interesting.
You know, some of those, when they stand up, the rifle and the bayonet are taller than they are.
Yeah, I was looking at that.
Yeah.
Those are pretty long.
So, the Spanish-American War, the 1st California Infantry volunteered en masse and became the 1st California U.S. volunteer infantry and fought in the Philippines. They took part in taking Manila, and the most famous member of the unit was the regimental chaplain, because he, as they're laying siege to Manila, which was a walled city at the time, he saw the Archbishop of Manila on the battlements. And being a Catholic priest, he says, hey, I have something in common with this guy. So they go out and talk, try to arrange for a peaceful surrender of Manila. They said, he said, I'd like to, but they're telling me no. And so the battle went on a little farther. Here we have a picture of one of the battles in the outskirts of Manila. This is showing what happens if you almost miss the ship. You have to crawl, you have to climb on. There's actually a photograph of this.
Where is this at?
This is in San Francisco, leaving for Manila. And this guy, poor schmuck's, he's never going to live that down. He's just getting high enough so they can open up one of these doors and he can crawl in.
What was the importance of Manila?
It was the capital of Spanish Philippines,
Right.
the major city.
Right, but what is so important about the Philippines?
We were at war with Spain because of blowing up the. Go ahead. Blowing up the main in Havana Harbor. So we ended up getting Guam. We had Cuba briefly, Puerto Rico,
So
and
that
the
gave us
Philippines.
control of the islands.
All the Spanish possessions in the Western Hemisphere. So, and California had its own navy at one time. There was a naval version of the National Guard called the Naval Militia, and where the National Guard reported to the War Department, they reported to the Navy Department. And this is Governor Stevenson with General Forbes, the Adjutant General, and this is on one of our ships. The Navy would give us ships, and at one time we had the battleship Oregon,
Oh, okay.
which we're trying to find a model of so that we could show that.
Okay.
So in 1904, after the implementation of the Militia Act of 1903, which partially federalized the National Guard, they started to have joint maneuvers with the regular Army from the Presidio of San Francisco and the California National Guard. They also brought cavalry from Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And this is now downtown Atascadero.
Oh,
You can see the hill right there
Yeah.
when you drive
now,
by.
Now it makes sense.
So this is now downtown
Atascadero.
Atascadero. And this just shows some of the implements of the late 1800s, the first aid packets from the Spanish-American War, a Chris that was captured in the Philippines from Moro insurgents, the type of web gear they had, which were, these two are called Mills belts, which were by Mills. It was a company that made webbed belts, and they made them quite a few, and the British loved them because they wouldn't rot in India. So, and then we have some battlefield pickups from the Battle of Manila. This is a Spanish volunteer cartridge box, and you can see how small he was by how thin his waist was. And these were some of the, this is a 1884 trapdoor Springfield single-shot rifle. It's one of the first breech loading rifles that we had. Now, Custer had the carbine version of this, but the copper, the jackets, instead of having brass, had copper.
So they rusted?
No, they swelled
Oh, they swelled. Okay.
and jammed their weapons. They couldn't, their rifles became useless.
So that's what they meant by jamming. They swelled. Okay.
Yeah,
That I didn't know.
And it was replaced in the mid-1880s with the Krag Jorgensen. But they found out this thing when the Spanish and later the Filipino insurrectionists had Spanish Mausers, which were better. This was a Norwegian-designed rifle, and it was the first one that we didn't have black powder, it had
Right.
smokeless powder,
Okay.
and it was the first generally issued repeating rifle.
That's what I was going to say. It had pellets,
Yeah,
right?
no,
instead?
no, it had a shell.
Shell,
It was a
oh,
30
okay.
caliber shell, but and they would, it had a 5-round rotary magazine, and we also have the cavalry version for that.
Right.
And
Are these guns still working? Or
yes, we've removed parts,
Okay.
and eventually we're going to have them all cabled down, but
Right.
we should have them hopefully cabled down by the event.
No, I was just
Well,
curious.
actually, because we have 24/7 armed security in
Right.
the building.
No, I was just curious to see if these came as working pieces or if they came
Well, some
as
of these we
just-
got from the Veterans Home in Yountville,
Oh, okay.
because
Okay.
they actually drilled the
They drilled in
residents
Yountville.
that was their physical training. They'd
Okay.
spend an hour on the parade ground. This is a 1902 uniform from the 10th Coast Artillery Company, which was formed from the 1st California Infantry. And we could tell this member was a member of that unit because you notice the service stripe for 4 years of service at that time. One's white, one's red. White means infantry service.
Oh, okay.
And in 1907, they became Coast Artillery, and he had 4 more years, which is signified by the red, which is the color of artillery.
And then all their cords, right?
That was just purely decoration.
Decoration?
Yeah.
The cords didn't mean anything
No.
at that time?
The only people who wear cords like that now, other than aides,
Right.
are infantrymen.
Right.
They're
okay.
special. So this is a clock that was won by the Regimental Band of Oakland's 5th California Infantry. It was won at the 1912 State Fair over by the General Hospital, County Hospital.
Oh, okay.
And we were the first state to have its own Air Corps. It was part of the Coast Artillery to do spotting for ships. New York claims it now, but we're going to drop this little piece of paper on them from the San Francisco Examiner, Chronicle, that shows we beat them by a year. And in 1916, of course, the Pancho Villa came across the border and attacked Columbus, New Mexico. This is Battery C, 1st California Field Artillery Battalion in Nogales, Arizona, commanded by Otto Sandman, who is this guy right here. His grandson is the facility commander here,
Wow.
and a brigadier general.
So that's Nogales next.
Yeah, that's
In
Nogales, Arizona.
1911?
1916. And this is when they returned to Stockton. This is the armory that was on the grounds of the old Stockton State Hospital.
Oh, okay.
And 6 months later, they're at Camp Kearney mobilizing to go to France.
I've been to Nogales, and Nogales, in some ways, looks the same.
So here we got the roster from Sacramento's Machine Gun Company, 2nd California Infantry. And if you look at who the commander is, James McClatchy.
Ah,
He also went to France in World War I. And now we're getting into World War I. So the M1914 marching boot. This is a haversack for Company A, California Engineers, which is now the support group headquarters in Roseville. The engineers didn't go with the California Guards 40th Division. They went with the 42nd Division, the Rainbow Division, which was made up of everybody else that wasn't assigned to a division. And so this is C Company 1st California Engineers became F Company 117th Engineers of the 42nd Division. And this is a pillow made out of a sandbag.
oh, okay.
The hat cord for a quartermaster, which is buff, is used for trim. He was a corporal. He was wounded once, and he had 18 months overseas. M1903 Springfield, which was the standard infantry rifle from 1903 until about the early 1940s. In fact, most of the people that mobilized for World War II, this was their weapon. We have a officer's shaving kit that was privately purchased, and this is the M1910 mess kit, and a bacon can.
Well, that's important.
So, with the National Guard, that left no state military force, so they formed the California Home Guard. Very poorly managed, very poorly equipped. One unit had the sheriff seize all the rifles from the Turnverein because they were gifts to the Kaiser, and that's how they armed themselves. They were either armed with Krags or with the 1884 trapdoor Springfields. But this is probably the most famous unit, the 54th Company, also known as the Lasky Rifles, as in the Lasky Studios. You've heard of their company commander, Cecil B. DeMille. These are all the studio technicians from the Lasky Studio, and his brother William was the first sergeant.
Uh-huh.
And here we have this. Every time we do an exercise, there's always souvenirs. So this is the souvenirs from the 1912 Joint Army Guard Museum, which was held in Salinas. But this is the Tanforan racetrack, where Tanforan Mall is. And this is the 2nd California Field Artillery.
In San Bruno, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is now the 144th Field Artillery headquartered in Van Nuys.
Oh, okay.
And they're a 155 millimeter self-propelled howitzer battalion. We have E Company of the 117th, which is now the 578th Engineers in Manhattan Beach. Helmet with the 40th Division, a French helmet, artillery helmet, and of course the M1916 German helmet. This is a typewriter that eventually became the Smith Corona Company.
Oh.
And these were used by the Army. We have an example of a 1917 field phone. This is what your average soldier, the jerkin, which is this leather part, was something that the British did that soldiers, American soldiers, adopted on their own. Not everybody had them, but it protected your uniform. And then we have a pattern 08, pistol 08 German pistol, and the famous Colt 45. And then we have a trench knife, which all had, there were several of them. 2 designs are illegal now by international law.
Because of the knuckle.
The triangular blade
Oh.
that doesn't seal.
Yeah, but I thought the knuckle part.
Oh, yeah, in
too
California,
was-
those
in
are illegal.
California, that's okay.
Yeah, in California.
Okay, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so a lot of the Coast Artillery units were, some of them became anti-aircraft units. This is B Battery, 1st Anti-Aircraft Battalion. They were the highest scoring American anti-aircraft unit in the American Expeditionary Force, and this is their record. They were assigned to the 2nd Division, which is the Indian Head Division.
Which is the,
Yeah, and they still wear that. The 2nd Infantry Division still wears the Indian Head as their unit insignia. And they're in Fort Lewis, Washington now. And this unit would have provided air defense to the Marines, because there was the 3rd Infantry Brigade, which was Army, and the 4th Marine Brigade, which is obviously Marines. And they were the ones providing air cover, air defense to the Marines in the Battle of Belleau Wood.
oh, okay, interesting. And Belleau Wood.
Was the
where-
major battery that don't get a Marine started talking about, because they won't stop.
Yes, in France, correct?
In France,
In
yes.
France.
This was the entire National Guard in 1922, only about 2,000.
Oh,
And this, I believe, is at De La Vega Park in Santa Cruz, which we owned. So this is the 40th Tank Company at the Del Monte Resort, which we called, and the Army at that time, the Organized Reserve Corps, now the Army Reserve, called Camp Del Monte. And we were there from about 1924 to 1928 when we got Camp San Luis Obispo,
okay.
what is now Camp. But here we have with the World War I French designed Renault tanks. 15 years later, this unit was captured on Bataan. And only a third of the unit made it back to Salinas.
And the Renault tanks were small tanks, right?
2-man tank.
2-man.
Driver and a gunner / commander.
Got it.
It sounded good, but you're the one in charge of the gun.
And
And one year we went to Yosemite. Obviously, 1921, so there weren't that many, you can see there weren't that many troops.
Well, a good number of them.
Yeah. But
How big
compared,
was this unit?
well, this is the whole guard, and
That's
it's
the whole
probably,
guard. Oh, okay.
probably about 1,500,
1,500.
where we have the State Guard, Air Guard, Army Guard, about 18,000. So here we have the interwar period, 250th Coast Artillery. You would have seen this helmet worn at the dock strike in 1934.
Okay.
Probably this one too, because the 160th Infantry from Los Angeles came up. For everybody went there. We have some examples of regimental china that officers had in their mess. 250th Coast Artillery, 251st Coast Artillery, 143rd Field Artillery. We got this from General Sandman's grandson, so this was General Sandman's china.
Oh, okay.
And then the 159th Infantry from Oakland and the South Bay. And this was an officer, not necessarily an officer, but someone who carried a pistol instead of a rifle.
Okay.
And then we have a later model field phone.
But come back and talk about the Pasadena chamber.
Oh, that was a shooting trophy.
I thought
Oh,
it was
yeah.
a horseman trophy.
No, I think this
Oh,
one.
okay.
I think this one was a shooting trophy. We have tons of silver trophies, like
Right.
300 of them.
But so I was just wondering.
Yeah. And then the officers' boots,
Right.
which Texas A&M, if you're a senior, this is
get
what you
those
wear.
boots. But that
Bugle.
that book. Is,
The book
This is still used.
because this is what we were horse-drawn artillery till
Right.
1936. We got a great picture of them. And then this is the coat of arms of the local 184th Infantry. And do you see something familiar on that coat of arms?
The
Battle axe. Right.
The battle.
That's still the coat of arms of the 184th.
That's what you said.
Yeah, and they're still around as an infantry battalion. They're headquartered in Modesto, but they have a company. Do they have a company here? They have companies in the general northern valley. Now this is mobilization. So we have the National Guard. This is what the shoes got better. Even we have a field shower, signal flags, the campaign hat. Then this is the State Guard that was formed in 1941 to replace the National Guard. 70,000 Californians served in the State Guard during World War II. Some of them were young, waiting to get drafted and wanted to get some military skills. A lot of them were veterans of the Spanish-American War and World War I. Because the Spanish-American War veterans were probably in their late 50s.
50s, yeah.
They had World War I equipment. They wore the current uniform. And you had people like, they had an evacuation regiment that you had Cesar Romero in, and several A-grade actors.
A-list.
A-list actors. The guy who played Judge Hardy in the Hardy Boys was the commander.
Oh, wow.
And their mission was to they had donated Woody station wagons
Oh,
that would evacuate people in case the Japanese invaded Southern California to get them out of LA and heading east. And this was the interior of the Exposition Park Armory in Los Angeles, now the California Science Center. That big brick building.
yeah.
So that's what it looked like in the 30s.
So that
And that's the entire 160th Infantry Regiment.
looks
formed
like
up.
their training facility in Chicago now.
Yeah.
That's how it looks.
Yeah, they're all pretty similar.
Similar, yeah.
Horse artillery, somewhere near Lodi. Still horse-drawn, probably 34, 35. And then in 36, they converted all their guns to be truck-drawn. This is the Oakland Exposition Armory. It was the Exposition Hall and Armory. So this is my favorite set of pictures because I have a personal connection to it. This is Camp San Luis Obispo. So you can see how big it was it was built for 18,000 troops for the 40th Division, which was the National California Guard mobilized in March of 41. This is where they went, except for the air unit and the coast artillery units. Everybody else went here. This is now Cuesta College. This is all open area. There's my building right in there. This is the hospital, which is now the West Facility of the California Men's Colony. And this is where the Engineer Regiment and the Medical Regiment and the Quartermaster Regiment were. This is now the East Facility of the California Men's Colony. But most of these buildings are still there at the
I was gonna say,
facility.
some of the buildings they
They're
kept.
still there,
they're-
yeah. And this is, after Pearl Harbor, they moved some of the units up to Fort Lewis. This is the 160th Infantry Regiment, also known as Los Angeles' own. This whole unit was from Los Angeles, just the city of Los
Just the
Angeles.
city.
So that's about 1,300 soldiers in an infantry regiment, 3 battalions, 12 companies,
That's pretty good.
with all their equipment, anti-tank guns, the band. The band was trained to be stretcher bearers also.
Oh,
That's one reason they kept them.
got 'em.
So I told you about the 40th Tank Company, later C Company 194th Tank Battalion. This is a famous painting of one of their tanks charging a Japanese roadblock. We've recreated this at Camp San Luis Obispo.
Oh, you did?
With an M3 Stewart and I think this is a Type 94 anti-tank gun. So we've got both. And so they recreated this painting in life size with the real objects. First people killed at Pearl Harbor were from this unit. Battery F from Long Beach of the 251st Coast Artillery, anti-aircraft. 3 guys went out and rented a plane, and when they got around to the north side of Oahu, guess who they ran into?
The Japanese.
Piper, civilian aircraft versus hundreds of Japanese Zeros and bombers and stuff like that. This is the return of the colors in Veterans Day 1946, when the California Guard was reestablished. Governor Warren, Curtis O'Sullivan from Sacramento. If I can find him in here, Roy Green. Okay, this is Roy Green, a Sacramento dentist, who commanded the 184th Infantry and took the Japanese surrender for Korea. Now, what's really interesting is this guy right here, Francis Zabriskie. I got to do some research because if he was in the California Guard, this was the top ace in Europe. Zabriskie's Wolfpack, the highest scoring squadron of the Army Air Forces in Europe.
So was he the lead or he was
He was the
trainer?
leader.
He was the lead, okay.
This is one of our every days like Christmas moments. This is a watercolor that we found in a paper bag in a box that hadn't been opened in 15 years. And it depicts the assault landing of the Sacramento Valley's 184th Infantry on Beach Red 1 and Red 2 on the island of Kwajalein, which was the Japanese gained this island this atoll after World War I and had that long to fortify it. It was a heavily fortified with concrete bunkers and with permanent barracks and it was considered the perfect amphibious assault of the Pacific War. It was everything went right, unlike everything else that happens. California State Guard again. This is the medical detachment of the 1st Infantry Regiment of the California State Guard. And here we have a print of California and Oklahoma sent their combat divisions to Korea. So from 1951 to 1952, they were fighting in Korea. Eventually, the National Guardsmen rotated out and were replaced by draftees and regular Army. And when they got back, they had to form a second 40th Infantry Division, NGUS. So there was, at one point for 2 years, there were 2 40th Infantry Divisions, one in Korea and one in Los Angeles. And in 1947, the Air National Guard was formed. And this is the 62nd fighter wing, probably at Van Nuys Airport. And you can see they have B-26 light bombers, and at this time, they weren't P-51s, they were F-51s, and a couple of T-6 Texans trainers. But this is the entire wing, all the pilots and crew. And that unit is still around. It's the 146th Airlift Wing out of Channel Islands Air National Guard Base. And they're the ones that fly the C-130 Super Hercules that they can slide firefighting equipment in. And you want to see some crazy pilots? They're
There's
crazy.
some good pilots.
So this is the 40th Infantry Division at Camp Cook, which is now Vandenberg Space Force Base. And here they are on the day before they left for Japan. So that's about 18,000 troops.
Wow.
And over here, this is the last of our World War II. This is the travels of the 184th Infantry, which was part of the 7th Infantry Division. So you have leaving out of San Francisco, up to Kiska and Attu, down to Hawaii, down to Kwajalein, back to Hawaii, down to the Admiralty Islands, north of New Guinea, into the Philippines on Leyte. They assaulted Okinawa. They were one of the assault troops, which they fought for almost a month before hostilities ceased. And that was one of the reasons why they dropped the atomic bomb, because they decided, as hard as just that one little island was, what was it going to be like if they had to invade the home islands? And they were moving troops out of Europe, and the British Army was moving troops. They were moving all their aircraft carriers out of the Mediterranean to fight in the Pacific, the British, and the Australians, and the New Zealanders, and the Indians. And then the bomb happened, and they rushed them up to Busan to take the Japanese surrender. One of the battles of the Korean War was the Battle of the Punch Bowl. This is you can see the reason why. It's a punch bowl, and we actually have the veterans of this battle commissioned a punch bowl with this topographic map on the inside made of silver, and it's at the 40th Infantry Division headquarters at Los Alamitos.
That's neat. Why did they do it in silver? Just to
That's what you
memorize?
did. And
Okay.
the rumor is that there's one dog tag from each member of the 223rd Infantry Regiment in between the layers of the topographic map and the outside.
Why is that a rumor?
Because the only thing I know is it weighs a ton.
So they haven't scanned it?
No,
to see if
no,
it's-
they haven't. Someone stole it and we found it somebody put it on eBay when it first came out, and the division commander happened to see it and called a friend at the FBI. Next thing you know, it's being delivered to us in Los Alamitos.
Ah, I see.
One of our most famous alumni, Tom Selleck. This is at Camp San Luis Obispo. I recognize that as a latrine building.
As a latrine?
Yes. I know what type of buildings, what type of roofs. I said I am intimately familiar with that camp. And he was a staff sergeant in the 4th Battalion of the 160th Infantry, which I believe was in Burbank.